Several scriptures mention the brothers and sisters of Christ. We see, for example, in Mark 6:3, "Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" Why then do some Christians believe that Mary did not have other children after Christ? This belief is called the doctrine of the perpetual virginity of Mary, the idea that Mary was a perpetual virgin and did not have other children after Christ. Well, when we look at these passages that speak of the brothers and sisters of Christ, the same word is used every time. It's this Greek word adelphos. Those who are for the doctrine of the perpetual virginity of Mary will note that adelphos can mean brothers or cousins or even just relations in general. Those that are against the doctrine of the perpetual virginity of Mary are quick to retort that in the New Testament, adelphos is used over 300 times and used exclusively to refer to spiritual brothers and blood brothers. Because of that, the most natural reading of these verses would be to read them as blood brothers as well. They would also note there is a Greek word for cousins that's used in the New Testament in Colossians, and this word was not used to describe Jesus' adelphos. Likewise, there is a word for kinsman or relative that is used 12 times in the New Testament, but it also is not used to describe Jesus' adelphos. Those that are for the doctrine will reply, Jesus in the New Testament offers frequently quote from the Greek translation of the Old Testament called the Septuagint. So the text that they use, that they are familiar with in Greek, is not limited to just that which we see in the New Testament. At that time, the Old Testament they were using was the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament. We know this from things like in Matthew 21:16, when Jesus cites Psalm 8:2. Psalm 8:2 says ordained praise in the Greek Septuagint, but ordained strength in the Hebrew. So we know, for example, in that case, he was using the Septuagint. So in this Greek translation of the Old Testament, adelphos is used as relative twice in Genesis, as close friends, and even as allies. It doesn't have to mean blood brothers. Martin Luther himself said, "I am inclined to agree with those who declare that brothers really means cousins here, for Holy Writ and the Jews always call cousins brothers." John Calvin also agrees that under the word adelphos, the Hebrews include all cousins and other relations, whatever may be the degree of affinity. Those that are against the doctrine will then bring up Psalm 69. They will note Psalm 69 is a messianic psalm about Jesus. We know this because it's quoted twice in the book of John. Verse 4 is quoted in John 15, and verse 9 is quoted in John 2, both about Christ. They say then we can safely assume verse 8 must also speak of Christ, and it clearly refers to my mother's children, which must mean other sons of Mary. Those that are for the doctrine of the perpetual virginity will reply, using that same logic you propose, verse 5 must also apply to Christ, which says, "O God, thou knowest my foolishness, and my sins are not hid from thee." But that must be nonsense. Christ is sinless. And so they'll note, Messianic Psalms blend the present concerns of the psalmist with foreshadowing of Christ. Not every element of a Messianic Psalm needs to be true of Jesus. Those that are against will then bring up Matthew 1:24-25. When Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but knew her not until she had given birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus. In saying that he knew her not until she had given birth to a son, this implies Mary and Joseph had customary marital relations after the birth of Jesus. Those that are for Mary's perpetual virginity will note the word until, the Greek word there, does not imply Mary and Joseph had customary marital relations after the birth of Jesus. Jerome, in 383 AD, makes a biblical defense against this, giving many counterexamples in Scripture where that same Greek word is used, and we cannot use this proposed interpretation, otherwise it would result in nonsense. For example, Matthew 28:20. Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Will the Lord then, after the end of the world has come, forsake his disciples? In 1 Corinthians 15:25, the Greek word is used again, for he must reign till he has put all enemies under his feet. Is the Lord to reign only until his enemies begin to be under his feet? And once they are under his feet, will he cease to reign? Similar nonsense appears in the Septuagint translation of the Old Testament for Isaiah, Psalms, 2 Samuel, Genesis, and Deuteronomy. John Calvin comments on this specific passage, and he notes, the inference that Helvidius drew from it was that Mary remained a virgin no longer than till her first birth, and that afterwards she had other children by her husband. No just and well-grounded inference can be drawn from these words. Martin Luther notes on it, the form of expression used by Matthew is the common idiom, as if I were to say, Pharaoh believed not Moses until he was drowned in the Red Sea. Here it does not follow that Pharaoh believed later after he had drowned. On the contrary, it means that he never did believe. Similarly, when Matthew 1:25 says that Joseph did not know Mary carnally until she had brought forth her son, it does not follow that he knew her subsequently. On the contrary, it means that he never did know her. Those that are for the doctrine of the perpetual virginity of Mary will note a few additional things from Scripture. In Luke 2, when we see Jesus went to the temple at the age of 12 with his family, there is no mention of other children in his family. In Scriptures, wherever Jesus is referred to as the Son of Mary, even in the same passage where his Adelphos are mentioned, Jesus' brothers, the Adelphos, are never referred to as sons of Mary. They'll also note in John 19:26 and 27, when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour the disciple took her to his own home. If Mary had other sons, it seems strange and out of character that Jesus would have gone out of his way to disregard family ties and commit a grave dishonor to his brothers by entrusting his mother to another man.